The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.
Back at you for another version of the UAB Director's Chair. I'm Tony Curry along with Mark Ingram. You can see him on the left-hand side of the screen here on our YouTube channel, of course, wherever you get your favorite podcast. If, in fact, you're not watching but actually listening. And, of course, on TKR, you can hear this show at least 5 days a week. And if you are watching right now, you see that Mark has finally made it to the big stage. He's on stage, and you're in beautiful Texas. And, of course, UAB fans know exactly why you're there. But tell everyone else what you're doing down there, man.
Yeah, I'm in Fort Worth, Texas, the men's and women's basketball tournament for the American Athletic Conference here in Fort Worth at a place called Dickey's Arena, which is a beautiful building, by the way. And they don't have a tenant, which is amazing to me. That meaning they don't have like a G League team or a hockey team, but they just have like a ton of rodeo type events and concerts and things. But it's a beautiful building. So for anybody that wants to come down for our tournament in the future, I hope you will. So we're in downtown Fort Worth and then headed over to the arena. The ladies, unfortunately, lost a couple of days ago, but our men's team plays tomorrow, Friday, against the winner of a game that happens later on today with Memphis and I believe Wichita. So anyhow, so we're going to rematch somebody, and it could be Memphis, who we know we've had two great games with that we split this season. So excited for the opportunity to play, man. But yeah, I found this little amphitheater outside of downtown, and I thought you'd, with all about classic rock, I thought you'd appreciate. Yeah, I finally made it to the big stage here.
It makes me wish I was with you, man. I mean, I love that. Anytime we get a chance to get outside the cage and do some radio and do some podcasts is great stuff. You've obviously played in a lot of what other cities has UAB played in as far as in conference tournaments go, and how is Fort Worth different than some of the other cities you played in the past?
Well, in Conference USA, the last few years, we were in Frisco, Texas, which is not from here. I mean, it's probably an hour, hour and a half from here, and just on the other side of Dallas, frankly. And it's interesting. We played at the Dallas Cowboys practice facility. So it's a football field. It's an indoor football field with 10,000 seats. And they put a curtain up at the 50-yard line, and they had a court on each side of the curtain. And the facility, Tony, is beautiful. And it's Jerry Jones, man, right? So There's an attached Omni Hotel that's gorgeous. There's a lot of retail around it, restaurants and things you can walk to. All of that was really great. What was really terrible was the basketball. It's the locker room setup is for football. So it's not made to have four different basketball teams in it at one time, and really more like eight, because you got to be, if there's two teams playing right now, obviously they need locker rooms, but the two teams that have the games after that also need to be prepping and have a locker room while they're warming up for the game that's after. So you got, with two games going on, that means you're doubling all that. So we had 8 locker rooms, and there were a couple of spaces that were fit for about a 4-person team, and you're trying to jam your whole basketball team and staff into it. So it was less than ideal in some ways, but there were real positives about it too. Again, the facility itself was gorgeous, and I don't think anybody minded the facility other than the teams themselves.
We're all in the same boat here, obviously, because we're all playing on a neutral site here, and that's what championships should be and what they're all about. I do find it really interesting, though, because normally you are playing in much larger venues. Obviously, you want to expose your fan base to as many possible seats as always. And I always, as a fan, I always think it's got to be so much more difficult to be going from, let's say, a 45 or a 5,500 square foot arena where you're obviously the basket, you can see the behind it, and then all of a sudden you're playing inside the Jerry World, and it's 80,000 seats, and the basket is like 10,000 feet away from the closest seat. Well, how does that play up particularly for, I say, a UAB, who obviously has just enormous amount of home court advantage? UAB plays lights out at Bartow Arena, as they should, and most teams in college basketball do, in college sports. But what's different? What's your biggest challenge when you're playing like these major arenas? Do the players get out and shoot extra? Is there a different way of going about that? How's it go?
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head, man. I mean, that's what you're dealing with, is you've got this situation where you've got this sort of cavernous, space behind you, and you're trying to get used to the visual, the glass. Remember, the glass it's a see-through backboard, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you can see everything around you, and you think, well, that really shouldn't matter, but it does matter, and it affects just the way the shot feels. It's no different than people that go and play like on an outdoor court. It just feels different, Of course, in that case, you got to account for the wind, but
Yeah.
but yeah, it's a hard to describe thing. But you said it. It's really, how does it feel, and you got to get used to it. And every team has the equal opportunity for shoot around. One of the tough things for us is, so when we play tomorrow, whoever we play will have already not just played a game in this facility, they will have won their game,
Yep.
and maybe two. And so there's certainly a rest factor that's to our advantage, but the disadvantage actually is that the other team will have seen that ball go in and sort of gotten any jitters out about being in the tournament, playing in a new place, those sort of things. They will have gotten past that. So you got to work through that early in the game, try to fight that off, make a few shots and sort of relieve yourself of that anxiety so that you can go and play and then, hopefully be successful. But there's advantages and disadvantages. The advantage obviously is that when we play tomorrow, there will have already been 2 rounds of basketball played. So you've advanced with a double bye already. So that clearly that's valuable. And if you can get through the first game, you certainly have more rest than the people that you've played. And so that's what you're hoping for.
I love this time of the season too, with conference tournaments. Obviously, we're talking about an automatic bid that goes along with that, and certainly being part of the AAC now is so much better for your team because you're going to get more bids just because it's more competitive there. But just the fact that you're playing these teams now for a third time, and you just mentioned the word Memphis, and it just makes me cringe because I think of the way UAB showed up in the second half of the last time they played them. I was like, oh my gosh, it was just a tale of two cities. And then of course I saw them, live at Bartow Arena when they beat them, a couple of weeks earlier, and it was just fantastic. So I love that third shot at Memphis. But as a coach, what does Andy talk about when he goes into these things? Obviously, he's a great X and O guy. He loves to adapt. He's probably one of the best guys at halftime adaptions when it comes to playing hoops. But when you're playing a team that you know extremely well already in your conference, is it playing any different in a conference tournament?
What you're trying to manage again is the hope that you're going to keep playing. So, you might see more people come off the bench than in a typical home game because assuming that you win, you got to play tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So you may not see as many minutes per player as you usually see. Now, then again, I think all that is situational based on how we're playing, because you got to have your best players on the court. So he's just constantly monitoring that. And if we could give somebody a couple of minutes, and even though that doesn't seem like a lot, a couple of minutes rest here or there to save them for tomorrow's game, with the hope that you advance, is also part of the equation. But you've seen all these teams. We've played everybody that we could play. In some cases, like Memphis and Florida Atlantic, we played them twice and split with both of those squads. So I think the top 7 schools in our league could all win it. I really think there's 7 different teams that could win this thing. One of the things that's kind of hilarious and this goes back to just transfer portal and buying players through collectives and what are you going to have from one year to the next. Think of this. South Florida has one conference loss to who? UAB.
Mm-hmm.
But they were picked 11th. Preseason, they were 11th. Charlotte, who finished so Florida Atlantic, they were picked first, finished second. So that's good estimation. Charlotte, who finished 3rd, was picked 9th, preseason 9th. And we were picked 4th and finished 4th. So, it's hard to predict what you're going to have. That's one of the things that makes scheduling really tough as it relates to the, you as fans, you hear about the net ranking system and strength of schedule and all that. Basketball coaches schedule year to year, and they're doing it knowing kind of what the opponent should have. Oh, yeah, they're going to be good. They made it to the tournament last year, this kind of stuff, hoping to get a good game from a strength of schedule standpoint. But when they lose people in the transfer portal, they pick people up through the transfer portal. You don't fully know how they're going to be. I mean, you might say, well, they picked up Tony Curry and he's really good. But if you don't, sort of gel well with the team around you, you might be good. But, you guys just don't, as a team, don't play great together. man, it's just hard to know what it's going to be. So I think it's made it more challenging from a scheduling standpoint to know who to schedule with and against, and for future games. But again, I think our league is really tough. We're hoping to get at least two, if not three, teams into the tournament, NCAA tournament, and that all predicates on sort of how this all goes over the next couple of days, how far everybody advances.
20 wins under the belt, of course, and the UAB Blazers vying for more and trying to get to the NCAA tournament. I think it's always kind of cool too to tournament time. Just I think is one of the best times of any college sports period, and it's just so much fun to watch teams come and play in strange arenas and to see how they shoot. And some teams just get really hot. The one thing that I've always noticed too, and this goes for March Madness period, man, if you don't have great guard play, you're not going to get very far in any tournament. And it just seems like out of the blue, man, this is where you really can set your sights on great guard play for anybody, and hopefully UAB will have that during the postseason. UAB Director's Chair, he is the athletic director for the UAB Blazers. Go Blazers, and check out UABblazers.com, of course, on their website for everything you need to know about the UAB Blazers and other sports, and we'll talk about that as well. It didn't take Nick Saban long at all to start talking a lot ever since he's retired from the University of Alabama. And of course, he was up in Washington, D.C. earlier this week in Capitol Hill in front of some key senators talking about college sports as we know it. Senator Ted Cruz came out and said about a 50-50 shot that Congress will pass some type of legislation on some antitrust protection as well as some other further regulation. Nick Saban talking about maybe the best thing would be some type of revenue sharing situation with college players. I know that you're well steeped in this as an athletic director for one of the best schools in the nation. What were your thoughts on what he had to say about what's going on in the world of college sports?
Well, I don't agree with paying athletes more than we pay them already, because what I thought Nick Saban's now I guess former athletic director Greg Byrne, who's the AD at Alabama, what he said in that same hearing was really well put, which is, these congressional leaders, they got to understand really how the enterprise works and what funding football and men's basketball are funding everything else. So they make I've been to some, my daughter Audrey is a gymnast, and so we've been to one or two of their gymnastics meets. They make good revenue there. They make good revenue from softball and baseball. It's not like they don't generate revenue, but they do not generate a profit. And so what he said was the other sports outside of football and men's basketball lose $40 million a year. I mean, think of that. $40 million a year is what they lose. That's larger than my annual budget for the entire department.
Yeah.
So he's losing $40 million. He's got to have that money. The money that people are suggesting would go to the players is how he funds the other teams. So you got to understand that. And just to say, well, and the university just needs to step up and fund those teams. Well, the university has other priorities too, right? Like education and science, research, and other stuff. And so it's just not that simple. And that'd be like saying the university's got to step up and pay for all those things, but they're not allowed to increase tuition. It's like, okay, math is math, man. 2 plus 2 is always, and you can't just all of a sudden say, yeah, but 2 plus 2 now has to be 9. Yeah, and that's what Greg is explaining, and I'm so glad that he did. But I think it's going to take somebody at a big budget school to explain that. My only regret, and I say regret, disappointment in the hearing is there wasn't really anybody from the Group of 5 level. I would have loved to gone with them to help say, like, really Alabama's in the minority here. They're not the majority. They don't speak for even though I agree with everything they said, or most everything they said, they don't represent the majority. They represent a really small grouping of schools, and they at least have that $40 million to fund those losses. A lot of us are. I mean, we're talking to people like, hey, man, turn the lights off when you leave your office because we got to keep the power bill down.
Sure.
And that's not an exaggeration, by the way. Those are conversations we all have to have with our staffs, So, like,
certainly understand. Certainly understand why you'd want to have Nick Saban up there, obviously, and say what you want. These senators, women and men alike, are egomaniacs too, and just to have Nick Saban up there probably got them thrilled off their seats. It was one of the most attended Congress hearings we've had in the last 3 or 4 years, probably because Nick Saban was there. And listen, Nick's a smart guy. I do like the idea that listen, the cat's out of the bag, so now we got to figure out how to get some of it back in. And if you're going to do some type of, I work in rock and roll, right? So I'll have a band come in and say, listen, when we get paid $50,000, and I'm like, okay, that means I'm going to have to sell tickets for $150 a piece. It doesn't make sense to me. And so then I'll always throw out some type of profit sharing margin. I'll go, okay, I tell you what, we'll give you 25 plus a cut of the door. And I think that's what kind of what Nick Saban's trying to say, because obviously every school is going to be different. He did say, it's not good for the rich to get richer and the poor to get poorer. And it really messes up the competitive balance of what we're trying to do with quote unquote parity in college sports as we see it. So there's got to be a way somehow the players can earn some due, but it's got to be based off what you're bringing in. And quite frankly, how different would it be if basketball players got a cut at the door? I mean, you're like, listen, we had 5,500 come up last night. In order for you to make your cut of the pie, we're going to need 6,000. Does that mean getting on their social media pads? Does that mean them handing out tickets on campus? I don't know. But when you talk about getting a slice of the door or getting something that way, if the more money's coming in and it's because you are doing what you're doing on the court, then so be it. You should get a split of that. I agree with that, but I guess that's neither here nor there, and it's down the road, I guess.
Well, I think the issue is, what I would contend is and that's part of the conversation is they are getting that. They're getting that in their housing, their meals, their scholarship, and then their other training that people never account for. I pay for all their tutors. They're not paying for that. If you want to go exercise, you decide, Tony says, I'm going to get fit. You got to go join a gym. You got a gym membership. I'm not charging them a gym membership to work out in the best weight room in this neighborhood. And then you say, I want to be real serious. I want to get a personal trainer. I got a whole team of strength coaches that at no cost to them that I'm funding that we're paying for that. And then if they get hurt, they go to our training room and I got a whole team of people to meet every medical need. There's no copay.
Yeah.
If you got hurt, you got to go pay a physical therapist and bill your insurance hundreds of dollars and you got to pay a copay. There's none of that happening. So we're funding all of that stuff through the dollars that you're referring to. So when it's just that it's not going directly into their hand. The question becomes, if it goes directly into their hand, then do we start charging a copay at the training room? Do I have to start charging them for the use of the weight room? Maybe I gotta take, and what's the tax implication for them? Right now their scholarships that's not considered taxable income by the IRS.
Yep.
But if they start getting cash, that's going to be. So, it's not the grass any greener necessarily in this scenario. And if I was the IRS, if they start making that money, I'm not sure that their current scholarship wouldn't start being taxable. So I think in a lot of ways could do more harm than good, even to the wealthiest schools.
Mark Ingram, he's the UAB athletic director. It's called the UAB Directors Chair. We had our good friend, of course, Trent Dilfer joins the show last week. We had Andy Kennedy coming up. We got another couple of things we're going to be doing with UAB Sports here in the next couple months. We're really, really excited about. So continue to listen to TKR and wherever you get your favorite podcast. Stick with us. We do have a classic rock question here. This is a great question. Tim from Fort Payne, and he actually called me. He's a friend of mine. He said, I know you like talking classic rock with Mark Ingram. He listens to the show every single week. He wanted me to ask you what you think classic rock, live classic rock, will look like in 25 years. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, will Cheap Trick still be touring? Will the Rolling Stones will be touring? Will AC/DC be touring? Leonard Skinner will be touring because there's not a remaining member in the band that's still alive. He said, are we just going to have a bunch of bands that sound like the old band, but none of the original members remain? Because we're now getting to the point where we've kind of crossed that line of 50-50. There's more surviving members or less surviving members, should I say, now in bands than there ever have been. You got a lot of bands out there that, you had Journey come through town the other night, and there was only one guy in the band that's the original member, but yet it did really, really well, and they're playing Journey music, and it sounded like Journey, so people were happy it was Journey. And then 400 did the same thing. So in 25 years, are we just going to have people buying the rights to a band's name, putting together 4 or 5 guys that sound like the band and go out there and tour as that band, and will it be okay? Because everyone's going to die at some point.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of, and there's a lot of tribute bands out there.
Yeah.
And some of them do really well. And when I say do really well, most of them sound great, but some of them do really well from an audience perspective. So I think you're going to continue to have more of that. I think it's interesting though that you say, because it'll be a redefinition of classic rock. Like I always thought of classic rock as like Ted Nugent, like that Ted Nugent is classic rock for me. But now we talk about classic rock. We talk about Van Halen and Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue, which that was not classic rock. For me, as a young person, that was the current sort of modern rock, not classic rock. Well, now they're classic rock. So the question is like, are bands like Soundgarden and Pearl Jam that's going to become that, they become classic rock? A redefinition of who fits into that category.
And
That's probably.
I guess where it would not work, and I'm glad you brought this up, is like a Ted Nugent, because Ted is Ted. And so there can't be another guy that looks like Ted or sounds like Ted, and all of a sudden I'm now Ted Nugent. You can be a band because it's a group of people. But I will say a Jim Croce, for example, who left this earth way too early. I think it's his cousin or his nephew or something is touring the country right now playing his uncle's music. And he sounds just like Jim Croce, and the kid's like in his 30s. And he's selling out. He played the BJCC concert hall several weeks ago, and they said if you closed your eyes, you swear you heard Operator being done by Jim Croce. And so even Jim Croce wasn't Jim Croce, but it was his cousin or his nephew, and he did a fantastic job. And I guess as long as they're still playing the music and keeping the music alive, I guess the most important part of this.
I love that. And Wolfgang Van Halen is touring around. He's got his own band, but he's also touring around with Sammy Hagar. And no, that's not right. Sammy Hagar is touring with Joe Satriani, and I can't remember who else is in the band. Jason Bonham is playing drums. I can't remember who the bass player is, and I don't know what Sammy calls it, but they're playing Van Halen songs.
Yeah, they are. And of course, Wolfgang was on the Oscars the other night. For some people that missed that, he actually got up there and was back to back with Slash, which was really, really cool. They were playing the song "I Am Ken" from, of course, the hit movie Barbie. And yeah, Wolfgang, man, if you haven't gotten a chance, if you want to hear like if classic rock was still as relevant as it was, and when I say relevant, I mean say the Who is still coming out with brand new music and people are still playing it. It just doesn't happen. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
If you want to go listen to some great music like classic rock, Wolfgang Van Halen, the album that he came out with a couple of years ago is probably one of my favorite albums of all time. I mean, it's fantastic. It doesn't sound anything like his dad, but it's fantastic. It's really good.
It's really good. It's really good.
Yeah, great stuff. All right, brother. Fort Worth, Texas. Go down there and get us a winter chicken dinner, man. Come home with a championship, will you?
I'm do all I can.
We appreciate you. We'll catch up next week.
All right, Tony. Thanks.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.